Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that has weighed heavily on my heart ever since I first came across it. It's about a woman who trusted too much, loved too deeply, and ended up questioning everything she thought was secure in her life. Her name is Claire. She's 32 years old, and she lives in a small lakeside town in Oregon. She has been with her partner, Evan, who is 35, for a decade. Their relationship began the way so many love stories do, through mutual friends, late-night talks, and the rush of realizing they had found someone they could not imagine living without. They started dating quickly, fell into a rhythm that felt natural, and after just 2 years, Evan proposed, but despite being engaged for years, they never made it to the altar. It wasn't that they didn't want marriage. They dreamed of a wedding, the kind where family gathers, vows are spoken beneath the soft glow of candlelight, and the world stops for just one night. They dreamed of traveling for their honeymoon, disappearing into some far-off place together. But life has a way of rearranging priorities. Bills, a mortgage, health expenses, and even small things like keeping up with their cars always seemed more pressing. So the wedding was put aside. Not forgotten, just postponed. Still, to everyone around them, they were husband and wife. They wore matching rings, called each other by those titles, and carried themselves as though the papers had been signed long ago. Their families understood, especially since both Claire and Evan were children of divorce. Marriage, to them, wasn't about the paperwork, it was about the bond they shared. Most of their friends accepted this too. Some even admired their choice to focus on building a stable life rather than spending thousands on one extravagant day. But not everyone saw it that way. Among their circle of friends was a woman named Melissa, 29, whom Claire had met years earlier at an old job. At first, Claire adored her. Melissa was bright, fun, and shared her taste in music, movies, and food. They laughed together, swapped books and recipes, and for a while, Claire felt like she had found a sister she never had. But Melissa had a habit that slowly turned into a poison in their friendship. She liked to scrutinize the men in their group, studying their behavior as if she were some kind of amateur detective, pointing out supposed red flags no one else noticed. At first, Claire brushed it off. Everyone has quirks, after all. But Melissa's theories were rarely kind. She once insisted that one of their mutual friends was secretly hiding his orientation, despite the fact that he had explained countless times that his bachelor lifestyle was simply because his job kept him constantly on the road. He was waiting for someone who could live that life with him, not hiding some secret double existence. But Melissa wouldn't let it go. She spun stories about secret encounters and secret lives, as though she thrived on the idea that people weren't who they claimed to be. Then, inevitably, her attention turned to Evan. Evan was never the most physically affectionate man. He was gentle, loyal, and warm in his own way. But he wasn't someone who liked holding hands constantly or displaying affection in public. He preferred quiet love, the kind you feel in small moments, like a glance across the room or a hand resting lightly on your shoulder. Years ago, when he sought treatment for severe migraines, he was told he might be on the spectrum. The test results had strongly suggested it. But instead of pursuing a formal diagnosis, Evan let it be. He chose to work with a therapist and focus on his health in the ways that mattered most to him. For Claire, this was never an issue. She didn't need Evan to be anyone but himself. She understood that his heart was steady and constant, even if his way of showing love didn't always look like everyone else's. To her, his quirks weren't flaws, they were simply part of the man she adored. But for Melissa, those same quirks became evidence. She whispered that Evan's distance in public was suspicious, that his habits hinted at secrets. And when Claire pushed back, when she insisted that she knew her partner better than anyone else possibly could, Melissa only grew more insistent. It hurt Claire deeply, because Melissa wasn't just a casual acquaintance, she was supposed to be a friend. Someone who would support her instead of planting seeds of doubt. The whispers, the sideways glances, the little digs in conversation, each one chipped away at Claire's peace of mind. She wanted to believe it didn't matter. But when the suspicion came from someone she once trusted, it carried a sting she couldn't ignore. For Claire, love had always been about faith. She believed in Evan with her whole heart. But Melissa's words lingered like a shadow, one that would not leave no matter how much light Claire tried to shine on it. And that's where the cracks began to show. Not in her relationship with Evan, but in her friendships, in the bonds she thought were unshakable. And sadly, this was only the beginning of a much deeper unraveling. For Evan, that brief diagnosis years ago had been enough. It gave him a sense of closure. And I never pressed him further. Pushing him into labels he didn't want would have felt cruel. And I loved him too much to force him down a path he didn't feel was his. Instead, I let him be who he was. Quirks and all. One of those quirks was his passion for fishing. To say Evan loved it would be an understatement. He could talk endlessly about streams, rivers, and lakes, about which waters held which fish, about the quiet beauty of spawning seasons and how each species fed and hunted. He knew it all, as though the lakes and rivers of Oregon had whispered their secrets only to him. When he held a line, he could tell what kind of fish was on the hook simply by the tug. The weight, the rhythm of its pull. He could look at a body of water and declare whether it would be a fruitful day. And he was never wrong. For me, his love for fishing was never a burden. It was a gift. I've always adored seafood, and Evan's devotion meant I never went without. If I mentioned in passing that I'd like salmon for dinner, by evening he'd be at the stove, cooking it with that gentle pride he always carried after a good catch. He even delighted in saving scraps for my rose bushes, promising me that the fish would make them bloom brighter than ever. His joy in these little acts filled our home with warmth, a quiet happiness that made me feel lucky in ways I can never fully describe. But Melissa didn't see any of that. To her, Evan's hobby wasn't passion, it was pretense. His sudden decisions to grab his gear and leave for hours at a time became her proof that he was living a double life. She whispered that his fishing trips were just an excuse to vanish, to be somewhere else with someone else. She'd point out how he'd suddenly stand, kiss me softly on the cheek, and say, "All right, Claire, fishing time," before heading out the door. For me, it was routine. For her, it was deception. What Melissa didn't know, or maybe refused to believe, was how present Evan still was. Even when he wasn't by my side, my phone would light up with messages, photos, and little videos all throughout the day. His smile, the sunlight glinting on the water behind him, the excitement in his voice as he showed me some strange bird perched nearby, or the sparkle in his eyes as he pulled in a fish he'd been chasing for hours. Even if he was gone the entire day, I felt like I was there with him through the pictures he sent, through the calls where his laughter filled my ears. Those moments made my heart ache with love. I could see how much peace he found on the water, and I wanted that for him. I would have joined him more often, but someone had to stay home for our dogs, and it always seemed unfair to leave them alone for so long. So I stayed behind, waiting with quiet anticipation for the moment he would return, his voice carrying stories of the river as he prepared dinner with his familiar care. We even had our own game. He'd quiz me on the type of fish he'd caught, and if I guessed right, he'd give me the warmest hug. But no matter how much evidence I showed her, Melissa refused to believe me. I pulled up countless photos, let her scroll through the folders full of his fishing trips, even showed her call logs where we spoke throughout the day. Still, she shook her head, stubborn in her certainty. She said that his lack of public affection was proof, that the reason we hadn't had a wedding was proof, that the fact I rarely joined him was proof. At first, I laughed it off. I trusted Evan completely, and his loyalty was never in question for me. But when Melissa kept repeating her suspicions, year after year, the laughter began to fade. Not because I doubted him, but because it hurt to hear someone I considered a friend tear apart the man I loved. The first time she brought her theory to me, I went to Evan. I thought he deserved to know, even if it was ridiculous. He looked so wounded when I told him. He asked if I believed her, if I wanted him to fish less, if somehow my silence had meant I agreed. My heart broke that day, because I saw the sadness in his eyes, a sadness I had never meant to put there. I told him no, I didn't want him to stop, that I trusted him, that Melissa's whispers didn't belong in our lives. He nodded, and in his calm way, chose to let it go. He told me that sometimes people see shadows where there is only light. And he was right, but the truth is, letting it go wasn't as easy for me. Because Melissa wasn't a stranger on the street. She was supposed to be my friend. And each time she questioned him, She was also questioning me. I always believed that part of being responsible pet owners meant not leaving our dogs cooped up for hours without a way to relieve themselves. I've reminded Clara of this more times than I can count. Over the years, I've even told her she's welcome to tag along with Ethan sometime, to see for herself how much fishing means to him and how little her suspicions make sense. But she never once took the offer. She brushed it off every time, saying it wasn't her place or that she would be bored. Ethan, being the kind-hearted soul he is, simply ignored the jabs. He never let Clara's comments spoil his weekends. And for the most part, I let it slide too. But about a week ago, things crossed a line. Ethan had been planning a day-long fishing trip with our friends Lucas and Marisol, a married couple we've known for years. They thought it would be fun, something between a vacation outing and a guided charter trip. Ethan was excited, and I was happy for him. Yet Clara found a way to taint even that. She pulled me aside and said I must be relieved that Marisol was going along, since apparently her presence meant Ethan couldn't possibly cheat. And worse, she added that Lucas wouldn't be able to cover for him either. Hearing her drag Lucas's name through the mud like that made my blood run cold. Lucas has done nothing but be a loyal friend. I couldn't take it anymore. I told Clara that if she had these suspicions, she needed to bring them directly to Ethan instead of poisoning me with them. Either she confronted him, or she let it go. I added that she was projecting her own issues onto him, since she hasn't been able to keep a relationship longer than a few months. My words weren't entirely fair, but I wanted to cut her down, because this wasn't just idle gossip anymore. This was Ethan, my Ethan, she was tearing apart. Clara didn't take my words lightly. Her face stiffened, and she shot back that I was naive and too afraid of being alone to see the truth. That cut deeper than I expected. But I pushed on, telling her she was projecting yet again, chasing men who left as soon as they realized her obsession with suspicion and petty investigations. I told her she couldn't understand a man with a real passion like Ethan, because she only went for shallow men who flexed in gym mirrors or self-proclaimed finance guys who blew their savings on crypto dreams. The silence after my words was heavy. She stopped talking to me after that. No texts, no calls, no sarcastic remarks on social media. And I haven't reached out either. I know I should feel relieved, but what I feel instead is this hollow ache. I'm furious at her for disrespecting Ethan, but also unsettled by the silence. When our other friends heard about the fight, they brushed it off with things like, "That's just Clara," or "What did you expect?" or "Ethan's the exception to the rule." They all know Ethan isn't unfaithful, but they excuse Clara's behavior like it's harmless. Maybe to them it is. To me, it isn't. At first, I stood firm. I told myself she deserved my harshness. But as the days passed, I started replaying the argument over and over. Was I too cruel? Did I let my need to defend Ethan turn into pettiness? Deep down, I know I wanted to hurt her back, to make her back down. And I succeeded. But the bitterness it left behind is heavier than I thought it would be. Tonight, everything will come to a head. I've decided to bring it up once more, though I don't know if I'll find forgiveness in me or if I'll finally sever the thread of whatever is left between Clara and me. Ethan doesn't know the weight this puts on my heart. To him, it's just another day, another fishing trip. Later this afternoon, we'll be going out on the lake together. He sees it as a chance for us to share in his hobby. But for me, it feels like the calm before a storm I can't avoid. After lunch, I showed Colton the original thread, and what began as a simple conversation stretched into the small hours of the morning. It turned into one of those rare, unfiltered talks where every word felt raw and vulnerable. He wanted me to share something before I even got into the harder details, his gratitude. He asked me to thank all of you for your kindness, for the encouragement you've poured into us, and especially for the notes from those who share his love for fishing. He wanted to say that even though we may never cast our lines into the same waters, he hopes you'll find the same peace and quiet joy he feels whenever he steps onto the riverbank. That's who Colton is. Even in the middle of everything, he wants to reach outward, not just hold everything in. When we finished reading your words together, we started picking apart the friendships we've been holding onto for years. It hurt more than I want to admit. Both of us realized we weren't clinging to these people because they made our lives better, but because they reminded us of who we used to be. Nostalgia, guilt, and some misplaced sense of loyalty had tied us to them, not genuine love or respect. We thought we were preserving community, keeping alive bonds that mattered. Instead, we were slowly cutting away at our own dignity, putting ourselves in situations that forced us to swallow insults and to pretend that our relationship wasn't worth defending. Colton and I don't always see eye to eye on how deeply certain friends matter. Some people meant more to him, others to me, but in this, we both agreed, it was time to stop. Enough was enough. It was no longer about being kind or polite, it was about protecting what we have. And protecting each other. And if that meant burning bridges, then so be it, especially with Trisha. I need to be honest about something I haven't wanted to face. Reading your responses and looking at Colton sitting across from me, patient and steady, I realized how angry I am. Angry at Trisha for her poison. Angry at myself for letting her sit at our table, speak into our lives, twist my confidence, and insult the man who has given me nothing but tenderness. I let her belittle him. I let her turn my love into something small, something to be questioned, and I carried that weight as if it were mine to bear. That anger has been sitting in me for too long, and now it feels like fire in my chest. So no, I will not take the so-called high road. There is no space left in me for quiet dignity when the cost has been our peace. Trisha will not be allowed to retreat gracefully, to weave her own version of events and paint herself as misunderstood. I will not give her that stage. I will not let her reduce Colton, or me, or us, to the caricatures she's been drawing in whispered conversations. I intend to make it clear to everyone what she's done, and if the fallout leaves her standing alone, then that's what she earned. Call it scorched earth, call it rage, call it whatever you like. To me, it feels like justice. Yesterday, during Colton's fishing trip, I made my first move. I blocked Trisha everywhere, phone, social media, email, and I reached out to the rest of our circle. I told them why. I told them what she said, what she implied, and I shared the screenshots I had kept hidden for too long. I didn't soften it. I didn't twist words. I wanted them to know that when she whispered her rumors about Colton, about me, and even about them, it wasn't just thoughtless chatter. It was calculated cruelty. I also asked a few trusted friends something that had been gnawing at the back of my mind. Did they think Trisha's fixation on Colton ran deeper than spite? Was she trying to drive a wedge between us because she wanted him for herself? Some agreed it was possible. One even said it wasn't the first time she had blurred lines in other friendships. And then Matt spoke up. He was one of the men Trisha had thrown into her cruel stories, accusing him of things that were never true. He confirmed, once again, that none of what she said about him was real. He even shared a memory from months ago, when he and his roommate had spent an evening with Trisha, drinking more than they should have. At some point, she got handsy with his roommate. He pulled back, said no. The next morning, she brushed it off, saying men like him would eventually cave anyway. Hearing that broke something in me. Not just because it showed how far she was willing to go, but because it made me wonder how many times she had done this, how many stories, how many people she had damaged, just because she could. And in that moment, I knew we were right. Enough was enough. Ethan and his roommate eventually drew a hard line. After everything that had unfolded, they no longer felt comfortable with Trisha being around, and she was quietly barred from visiting their apartment. Ethan admitted later that he suspected this was where the rumor about the rainbow wristband began. In the end, he stepped back from the wider group altogether, saying he needed space to reevaluate who he let close to him. I didn't press him. He already looked exhausted, like someone carrying more weight than he could hold. Meanwhile, Adrian and Marisol seemed to fade into silence. Marisol clung to the belief that Trisha was the real victim, while Adrian stayed vague, keeping a distance from the chaos without directly taking sides. The last straw came when another friend sent a screenshot of Trisha making cryptic comments online, suggesting that Adrian and Marisol were secretly into swinging because of a decorative pineapple on their kitchen counter. After that, they both went dark. No one has heard from them in weeks. One friend's relationship completely unraveled when his girlfriend, suspicious after all the rumors, searched his phone and found either messages or photos, none of us are sure which, that convinced her he had been sleeping with Trisha on and off. She left him in anger, leaving a voicemail that his brother later played for me. His brother called asking what was going on, desperate for answers none of us could give. That friend, too, has cut off contact. Then came a darker revelation. A close friend of mine admitted her struggles with prescription painkillers after losing her mother to cancer. Trisha had been blackmailing her, threatening to expose her addiction if she didn't provide dirt on Ethan, Adrian, and Jay. That confession shifted my priorities completely. The drama with Trisha suddenly seemed trivial compared to the real pain in front of us. We agreed that helping her heal had to become our focus. But the final blow was an old story resurfacing. A former friend of Jay's confessed that, during a Friendsgiving last year, Trisha had tried to perform sexual favors in the bathroom, first on him, then immediately after, on another guy when he turned her away. The story was humiliating and sad, but it also pieced together the bigger picture. She hadn't just been reckless, she had been systematically trying to sabotage nearly every relationship within the group. Jay, Ethan, and I started a new Discord server, a quieter space for the friends who had chosen to step away from the chaos. The conversations now are mostly piecing together timelines and sharing screenshots, confirming what we already knew. Trisha had been trying, in one way or another, to either sleep with or destroy nearly every man in the circle, and to push out or manipulate nearly every woman. But now, we've shifted focus. Instead of letting her chaos define us, we're standing together for the ones who need real support. The scars remain, but healing feels like the only way forward. This story is unsettling because it mirrors patterns that happen in real life far more often than we'd like to admit. Toxic people can find their way into friend groups, workplaces, or even families, spreading chaos until no one remembers how things used to feel before the damage. What makes it harder is that toxicity doesn't always come in obvious forms. It can hide behind charm, vulnerability, or even the illusion of being the victim. By the time the truth comes out, the damage often feels irreversible. If you've ever found yourself in a situation like this, the most important step is recognizing the warning signs. Pay attention when someone constantly stirs drama, pits friends against each other, or thrives on secrets. Notice when your energy feels drained after every interaction. These are not quirks, they are red flags. Setting firm boundaries, even if it means stepping back entirely, is sometimes the healthiest option. For those who've already been hurt, healing begins by leaning on the people who remain steady in your life. Build smaller, safer circles where trust can be rebuilt slowly. Therapy or support groups can also help process betrayal and emotional trauma, giving you tools to move forward without carrying the weight alone. The truth is, you cannot control how destructive another person chooses to be, but you can control how much space you allow them in your life. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it's survival. And when one person poisons a group, the best revenge is not retaliation but choosing to rebuild in a way that leaves no room for them to return.